Indiana Jones, and that is until arc flash issues came along. Uh, the what this episode of My Ramblings is about. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the early part of my career, having gone through the PDC internship and learning, getting familiar with all our power distribution systems and learning to work safely around electrical equipment, is that, well, um, aside from just sitting at the office, if I needed to go out to the field and collect data, mostly we use nameplate data, I was able to do that. A lot of the equipment that we had in place, some of it was old, some of it wasn't. But you would, in order to get the nameplates of the circuit breakers and the rest of the ratings that the circuit breakers had, you know, you actually had to take apart cover plates and that sort of thing to get access to them. So if I was working on a project and it needed to connect to the primary distribution system, I would call dispatch, and they'd let the high voltage people know, and then the high voltage people would come on, unlock the gate so I could get in and get the data I need, and that was just the standard way of doing it. Plus, you wanted them to know that you were there working on your equipment, in case anything went went bad or you know. Um, Plus, it's good to have controlled access to the things that you're doing. But again, some of this equipment was old, and you know, you had a crowd up on a balcony. I guess they came out of a class. They were looking down, watching. So I'm disassembling this stuff and recording all the data I needed for the project I was working on. Sometimes we didn't necessarily need to connect into the primary distribution system. It might be a project, and so to avoid change orders and unforeseen conditions, I would go disassemble panel boards and find out, okay, does this thing have provisions for adding breakers? Which breakers are actually connected, and also which ones can I use for my project? And you know, I didn't feel uncomfortable. I knew how to work safely on it. Later on, when I was working in South Texas, I think the '98 edition of the NFPA 70E started talking about arc flash. I had gotten safety training when I worked for the Department of the Interior. Kind of had some vagaries of it, but it really spelled it out, I think, in that edition of the NFPA 70E. And so, it kind of put an end to me doing that kind of thing. Um, because once you become aware of arc flash, there's not only does it become an issue of safety and protecting yourself, but it also sort of becomes, well, you can't really work that way anymore anyway. And um, so so I used to go out into the field, collect my nameplate data. Nowadays, and later in the career, it was limited strictly to non-energized stuff, mainly getting nameplate data, recording and graphing the configuration of distribution lines, just collecting data and information that I needed in order to do my engineering duties. Didn't really have people at our disposal to send out and collect the information. Um, so what ended up happening is, I don't know if you remember the Indiana Jones movies. You had an anthropology or archaeology professor who he'd teach class and he'd do his studies, and then he'd be off on an adventure. The movie focused mostly on the adventures. Wouldn't make a good movie. It might be an interesting lecture, but it wouldn't make for a good movie to if the movie focused on the lectures that Indiana Jones gave. So it mostly focused on his grand adventures, going out and exploring stuff. And I liken my job to Indiana Jones. Half the time at the office, half the time out in the field collecting information and data and what have you. When I went through the internship, um, learned an awful lot of useful stuff. I didn't learn how to install circuit breakers. I didn't learn how to do maintenance on equipment. Most usually when they did the maintenance, sometimes let me help. with a little thing here or there, but mostly they were just indoctrinating me on safety, like this mechanical spring in the power circuit breakers that smash your hand off. They didn't want me to lose my hand. Um, so they made me aware of stuff like that. So anyway, I liken myself to Indiana Jones. Half the time in the field, half the time at my desk.